All right, number two, let's talk about training. So I'm a data nerd. I'm an information geek. I really love this stuff. I'm gonna grab a couple books here. So if you're interested in data and information like I am, there's a couple books that I would recommend. This is the Power Meter Handbook by Joe Friel, and there's a couple books by him that I'd really recommend. This is a great book if you're wanting to do power-based training. And if you're going to do training as cheap as power meters have gotten now, you can get one out there for $300. And $300 isn't cheap, but for what you get out of it, it's really worth saving up for. I would recommend taking $300 out of your bike budget, putting it on a power meter, and riding a cheaper bike with a power meter. That's how much I think it's worth it. And then this book, Phil Burt's Bike Fit book, is really helpful for if you don't have anybody near you that can help you do a bike fit, or you want to just try to do it on your own. That can help you get really close and reduce your likelihood of injury. So basically anything that Joe Friel writes, I would recommend. He also has, he's also the author of the Cyclist Handbook. He's written the Cyclist Handbook, the Triathlon's Handbook. He's written, or Bible, sorry, the Cyclist Bible, the Triathlon Bible, all those books. I'll try to put a snippet up on screen for you here in post. But he really takes the science side of physical fitness and exercising and boils it down and says, here's all some information about this aspect of training and physical adaptation and all these kinds of things. And here's how that applies to you and what you should do to make that work. And here's an exercise plan that will just do that for you. So he really takes all those very complicated, sciencey, biomechanical stuff and just condenses it down into something like, okay, here's how this works for you. And here's an exercise that will just go do that. And so I highly recommend it. And the Power Meter Handbook has all that information in it. And there's a lot of overlap between that and the Cyclist's Bible. If you get one, I'd actually probably recommend this more than the Cyclist Bible, because the Cyclist Bible is a little bit of information overload. This is very application based, but I find them both to be really, really good and worth your time. So from my training standpoint, I started formally training at the beginning of this year. So it's right now halfway through June, so we're halfway through the year. I started training in January. And like I said, I've been riding kind of casually, informally. I've been riding on Zwift. I've been riding in the winter. I've been getting out and riding on my bike outside just kind of for fun, just throwing out junk miles, not doing anything particular. Like I said, mainly just for the focus of losing weight, because I didn't want to dedicate myself to a really demanding fitness plan that would throw off my weight loss. So I just wanted to focus on getting the time in, do the weight loss stuff, get myself feeling better. And then once I had more energy and could really do more work, then I could focus on the training. So I got to the beginning of this year, I've been pretty successful with that. And so I started doing some more formal training. So I went through Zwift's Build Me Up program and did that over the winter. It's a 12-week program. It's great. I thought I gained about 30 or 40 watts on my functional threshold power by doing that program from beginning to end. And if you're not aware of what FTP is, take a look at that book. It'll explain it all for you. But what you want to do in the beginning, you find your race. Ideally, your race should probably be at least 3 or 4 months out, depending on how much training you really want to do, what you want to accomplish on that race, whatever the case may be. You want to try to make sure that it's a long ways out, especially if you have if you're like me and you have a lot of training you need to do to be effectual. So I kind of decided that this is something I was going to do right around this time. I didn't know if it was going to be this race or a few others, but I'll talk about race picking here later on. But you want to set an initial goal. And a lot of times that initial goal is a very broad, high-level goal of like from a fitness standpoint, I want to be able to do this. So my high-level goal was I want to have a functional threshold power, an FTP, of 200 watts, which is just a fancy way of saying if I really had to, I could hold 200 watts on a bike for an hour. That's all that really means. It's just a fancy way of saying that. And that was going to be my goal. So I accomplished that by using Zwift's Build Me Up plan. I was about 180, and I got up to about 204, and that was back in February. So I ended up around 204 right around in February, and that was good. I wanted to get up to 225. My real goal was to hit 225 by the race, but I wanted to hit 200 and then kind of gradually work my way to 225. That didn't happen. I'm still at 200 now, but that's okay. Again, further on, we'll talk about when things don't go the way you want them to. But you set a real high level goal and try to get there about 12 weeks before your race hits. And then once you're about 12 weeks out, start focusing on specific aspects of the race. So things, if you look at the race course, things that you expect to see on this race. So at 12 weeks out, I started tapering my training. I started going out on my bike a lot more because it was getting warmer. It was in February. It started getting a lot warmer outside. So I started getting out on my bike a lot more, putting in more miles on the actual bike I'm going to be riding, which is this one over here. And really seeing if my training indoors matched my training outdoors, which was very close. And I was thankful for that. I was thankful that it was translating really well to being outside. And then I started focusing on bike skills, cornering, handling, low speed handling, just getting on my bike and doing some training on my bike. So basically I took what I was doing on Zwift and then I just did it outside. And if you don't want to do Zwift, all the stuff that Zwift does is in this book. All of the training courses and stuff, you can do it all by yourself with all the information that's in that book. All the training and everything's in that book. So again, that if you don't get anything out of this segment, just go buy that book. Then let's see, where was I? Yeah, so then I started focusing on specific things, and I'll try to put an image of the course up, but I mentioned already, it's a very hilly course. It's really, really gravelly, and it's real hilly. And I hadn't actually gone and scoped the course because it's about an hour away from where I live. And with kids and stuff, it's hard to just pack everybody up and head up there and go drive over 50 miles of gravel. So I didn't really have a chance to case it out, but I knew it was going to be a gravel course. And I knew it was going to be very hilly because the course map, the GPX file that they sent out, showed up to 10% elevation grade, 10% grade in some places, and 4,400 feet of elevation change over 52 miles, with some really brutal hills. And so I started doing a lot of hill training. So I would go out, and there's a hill outside my house here that's about 30 feet of elevation change. Again, nothing compared to 4,400 feet. But I would go out to that hill, and I would just barrel up that hill as hard as I could. Just really try to push myself up that hill as hard as I could. And what that did was train me to be able to get out of the saddle and work really hard on a hill, and just do that over and over and over again to try to push my power up. And I pushed my top end peak power from about 600 watts to about 800 watts by doing that. Just to continually every week going out 2 or 3 times and just hammering that hill over and over and over again, just pushing my peak power up a little bit by a little bit. And the other thing that I knew that I was going to need to do is I was going to be able to handle hills, and then I was also going to be able to have really good cardio endurance. Now, if you're coming into this as a runner, or if you're coming into this, if you're in a similar situation like me where you haven't ridden a lot, but maybe you are, you have a cross sport that you're pretty good at, like running or swimming or something else, I don't know, badminton. Maybe you already have pretty good cardio endurance. I did not. I've been out of shape for about 10 years. And so I knew I needed to really build up my cardio endurance. So I focused on then taking a heart rate monitor and then going out and holding my heart rate at my aerobic endurance heart rate, which is for me is about 145, 150, and just holding that on hills, because I knew it was going to be really hilly, getting good at being able to hold that even on a hill for at least an hour at a time. And once a week, I would go out and try to bump that up. So as I got closer, I would try to push that out a little farther. So I start at an hour, and I go to an hour and 30, and then I do an hour and 30 for a while, and then I go to 2, and then on and on and on until this last weekend, I went out and did 3 hours and 45 minutes at 145 beats per minute. And I did 2,000 feet of elevation change without ever really going over 160 beats per minute, even for just a short period of time. So the one thing you want to remember about training is that physical muscular endurance and muscular strength can be trained relatively quickly. So you can go into the gym, you can do some squats, you can do some presses and things like that, and build up your muscular endurance relatively fast. And when I say relatively, I mean compared to your cardio endurance. So if you're like me and you don't have a lot of cardiovascular endurance, aerobic endurance, you need to spend a lot of time and dedicate a lot of space for making that happen. And that's both in actual exercise time, how long you're actually out on your bike, and then in time, in actual length of time. So you want weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, whereas you might be able to spend 2 or 3 weeks focusing on your muscular strength and doing some squats and building up your muscles by doing some squats or things like that, or going out and doing power work on your bike if you want to do it that way. And you might be able to make a lot of progress in that really quickly. If you want to make progress in your aerobic endurance and your aerobic capacity, you need to be able to dedicate months to that goal, because it's your aerobic health grows much more slowly than your physical fitness. So make sure that if you're going for a very long race, like if you're doing a criterium and it's like 25 miles in less than an hour, basically just focus on physical strength. But if you're like me and you're going to do something that's going to be a 4-5 hour effort, get out there and make sure you're dedicating one long ride every week, and don't hammer it on the long ride. Focus on doing relatively low RPM, or relatively low BPM. So like for me, that was about 145, whatever your endurance, aerobic endurance territory is. Again, go back to this book for reference. And just run in that territory and getting used to being in that territory. What that does for you is it teaches your heart to be really efficient in that range. So I'm planning on running my race at about 145 to 150 beats per minute on average through the whole race. So I've spent at this point probably close to a whole day on my bike just running at that pace, not including all the other training I've done, but just that focus on that thing over the course of the last several months, just doing 145 to 150 beats per minute solid on hills, because that's what I want to do. So again, just to reiterate, front end, find a goal, a base, kind of a real high level fitness goal that you want to accomplish, whether it's improving your functional threshold power, improving your muscular strength, endurance, and fitness, and things like that. And then when you get closer, look at the specific aspects of the race, and try to make sure that you're focusing on things that will make you better in that race. So when I started this, all right, so I think that'll do it for training. I think that gets you the idea on training. Let's get to number 3.